my argument. It is not.
Yeah, that's a good argument. I have to admit that's a pretty damn good argument. It's probably better than most of Great Tex's argument. The old is not. Well, no, Great Tex actually used that in his last video. He did use that in his last video. Why not? That's what he said to Living. Well, why not? I mean, it's like, oh fuck, you mean I have to explain to you again about the little elephant and the broken legs and shit? I mean, that's why not, you dumb shit.
Well, you know, if you talk really slowly with an accent, people assume you have a higher intelligence than you actually do.
Well, I do believe accents do help. If you can be a little slightly hard to comprehend and decipher, people pay more attention to what you're saying because of the eccentricness of your speaking voice. So often it can be a benefit.
Bunfoot?
Yeah, a benefit. A benefit.
I like buns.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. There's that one philosopher guy though, that Vigo Smigo guy, or Bunky Boogie, or whatever the fuck his name is, and he has that horrible speaking voice. It's kind of lispy and oh, it's just horrible. But he's
a really nasally voice.
He's fucking brilliant, but his voice is so harsh to listen to. It's like, oh god, the guy is, yeah, Salvo Jazevak. That's the guy. Oh, that guy is really, he's really quite brilliant. He's really probably the smartest man on earth. But man, he's so hard to listen to.
Well, I mean, if you don't even like Jimi Hendrix, then you're no one to judge the smartest guy on earth. But still.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, you're not doing your credibility much good with that line. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix was a real Einstein. I'll go to France and drown in a bathtub. Yeah, it took a real lot of brains to do that one. Yeah, exactly. You know, puke in my own throat and drown in the tub. Yeah, doesn't sound like a good time.
It's pretty popular at the time.
Now, it does seem like all the rich and famous were doing it. That and choking on chicken bones. But you know. But that's another one though we didn't talk about, was that big fat woman. What's her name? Mamas and the Papas. Right? I mean, they had the hot chick, and then they had, what's her name? Mama Cass. Fucking amazing.
Ham sandwich.
Fucking amazing. But what's her name? Man, she was hot. She was something. She had that ugly good daughter. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to Mackenzie Phillips. Man, she really turned out so fucking weird looking. I was saying, how could that like perfect 10 woman pop that thing out? Yeah, well, that Mackenzie Phillips is the daughter of what's her name, and you know, she's a really beautiful woman. But anyway, and but actually, yeah, the neighbor I used to have, he worked at a drug rehab, and Mackenzie Phillips was at it, and so the back of his car was all full of her fan mail. And it was just so funny because we were sitting rifling through her fan mail, you know, in the back of his car, and it was like, oh, this is so wrong. They wouldn't let her have her mail. They thought it would disturb her. Who's what? Yeah, well, that's what we were figuring. No one's going to read it anyway, so we might as well.
His parents were in the Mamas and the Papas, right?
Who's what?
No, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Mackenzie Phillips, isn't she the one? She was some 60s band that she was the kid's
No, Mackenzie Phillips was the daughter of the, whatever her name was. What's the chick's name? Damn it, and the Mamas and the Papas, the blonde chick. I can't remember the things.
And her dad too. Those two both were in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the daughter, she ended up in that stupid One Day at a Time TV series or whatever with, what's her face, who married the, Van Halen guy.
When I was that age, I watched that.
Valerie Bertinelli. She was in that TV show with Valerie Bertinelli. And then, Valerie Bertinelli married the whatever guy, Eddie Creepo. That really disappointed me. She had a great face. Valerie Bertinelli had a great face. That was a great face. Yeah, well, Ann Coulter's a weird one. Yeah. I have to concede that I do find her a little sexy, but whatever. I don't know what the hell that is.
She's very intense. I think that's the attraction.
Yeah, and she does that miniskirt thing, which I really do like the miniskirt thing, so that works for me.
But the body's kind of rough, kind of lame.
Yeah, and she's got that voice. I'm Darth Vader.
Mania!
Yeah, it's just kind of.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me. Did you kick E.G. Skyler?
Yeah, well, I kick Skyzer. Yeah, no, we can't have a conversation with Skyzer. Yeah, I just can't talk to him. I mean, he doesn't say anything directly. He just talks shit. I mean, I just can't have a conversation with him. He's incomprehensible and useless. Do you know when he's ever said anything directly about anything ever? I mean, can you quote a Skyzer quote that has complete rationality? I mean, I can't think of a single sentence.
Not complete rationality. That's kind of a high standard.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, you should be able to accomplish that with one or two sentences somewhere. I mean, once in a while, a sentence should be completely rational.
You don't like the Beatles, that's what it is. You are an anti-Liverpool bigot. There's a lot of those.
Yeah, well, that's probably true.
Like high flv388.
Oh, yeah, high flv388, yeah.
Also called Nord.
That's another guy you can't have an argument with. Well, let's talk.
Skyzer's harmless, though. I know what you mean. You can't have our argument with him, but he's kind of harmless, too. But I whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to hang around and watch or something, that's fine. But yeah, I just can't deal with him in conversation. It just isn't. It's circular before it even starts. It's like it doesn't even start out as anything else but a bent conversation.
If we're bacteria with brains, why can't bacteria be humans without brains?
Yeah, humans without brains. Like, yeah, why are there a flying anus? What the hell?
People like that.
What the hell? What the hell is that? A human without a brain? What exactly do humans without brains do? They make poo, and they start to decompose.
Very shy.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see much point in that one. No, whatever. I don't even like when humans work. When they don't work, they're even less useful.
I agree with Fred that we could change the conversation to, hey, let's compare things that are living and what's that all about. So, I mean, the thing is, what's the problem with saying, well, okay, plants are living, so you have to make sure you treat them nicely enough that it's symbiotic, it's in their best interest. I mean,
let's qualify the word living again.
You think apples mine an
Let's
apple orchard?
qualify the word living, because we've had this argument before, okay? A conference board made a pretty good video pointing out that these words don't have an explicit definition, that they have this whatever he called it, but they cycle out into different nuances of definition. So, I'm just saying, we know there's a big difference between a living cell, a single cell, okay, and a human being that's made up of billions of cells. So they're two functionally different kinds of machines. And they should really be called something different, because they're alive in very different ways. We're alive because of a heartbeat, okay? We're alive not because we have one central location for our DNA in the center of us or something. So, I mean, we're alive in a completely different way than a single-cell organism, or a collection of single cells that are loosely connected. Because, and so I'm just saying, we've already had this argument. I mean, you know that I draw a line at a nervous system, a central nervous system most specifically, and that's a key fundamental difference between us and a bacteria or a plant. So these all things might be alive, but it really doesn't matter if they don't have neurology. So neurology is a different kind of life to me, fundamentally different. And that's where the line's got to be drawn, or one of the lines.
Well, I think it's really super different, but it's this thing fundamental. To me, that has a technical meaning. And, you know, it's like, depends, maybe there's multiple senses of fundamental. I mean, like, as a human, if you went across that threshold, and, like, if you could imagine being a dog, and you haven't passed this threshold where basically, look, I can't even recognize that as experiencing stuff. I agree, there is a threshold, probably in central nervous systems, but I don't know, maybe in even invertebrates and stuff, it might still be there. I agree, though, that it takes nerves, real, you know, nerves, animal nerves, not the analogs of nerves. So, I mean, I agree there's a threshold there, but not for everything.
What are you guys talking about?
Britney Spears and that Weezer cover of her song.
I was just listening to Weezer.
You ever heard them do, what's that song? Hit Me Baby One More Time. Oh, great cover. But I think the thing is, maybe you could explain it to me. Is it that Conference Report doesn't want to have this idea that when he's sitting on all this cotton and everything around him, that he's in the middle of a big slaughterhouse and a morgue, right?
I don't even know what that means. But I just think the argument is that, you know, technically when you're dead, right, you're dead because you lose brain activity, and we call you dead. Obviously your cells, most of them are still alive, and they will remain alive quite a while. Some of them for a very long time will still remain alive. Your hair follicles will still be, well, you're not really technically growing hair because, but you do grow hair for a little while. But what else was I going to? So yeah, a lot of these cells aren't going to die for quite a while. So yeah, your heart stops and your brain activity stops, but there's lots of fucking cells that are still going to live. But you're dead, all right? I mean, so you're still made out of living matter, but you're dead.
Here's the thing I'd like to ask you. Okay, you probably know about this thing where if you cut the corpus callosum, that's all of the nerves that goes between both halves of the brain go through this thing.
Not all. What
do you mean?
Well, no, it's not the only connection between the two hemispheres of the brain. It's one of the connections between the two hemispheres. Your brain still communicates between the two hemispheres through the reptilian lower part of your brain. So it's just a higher connection. It's like cutting the bus, okay? But you leave the USB still works, okay? It's like cutting the bus, but the USB still works.
Fair enough. Yeah, but you know about that stuff and how weird it is, like if they show an object to one eye, they can write the word, but if they show it with the other, you know, it can pick a picture. Well, the thing is, the argument is that they have two consciousnesses, that both halves of the brain are separate but conscious. And I'm curious your take on that. If, you know,
yeah, well, they're not really,
right
it's not really two consciousness. They're still one person if you present information to them the right way. It's just that, yeah, one part of their awareness has been blocked. So it's like having one eye is being separated, and it's having an experience that your consciousness isn't aware of, but your subconscious is aware of it. So you can still
Well,
access,
here's the thing.
you can still access it in your subconscious, okay, and the guy will say, holy shit, I didn't even know, I knew that. So I'm just saying he still has one consciousness, because he's going to be just as surprised as the experimenter that he came up with the right answer, even though he didn't think he knew the right answer.
Well, but there's been some tests. I just saw, I think it was a TED Talk, so it's not with authority, but, take it with a grain of salt, but that some tests have shown that the two different sides, since you can ask them different things, they found cases where one side expressed the belief in God and the other side didn't. So the implication is that even when that bus is there, that bus just hides the fact that we have two consciousnesses, and really we do have two, and they can be fused somehow. See, that goes along with my ideas, because who cares? Well, you're dead, but that doesn't mean the cell that goes, I have sugar, I don't have sugar, is dead. It makes sense if you can understand that in a brain, right?
Yeah, I know, but it's still a brain, Pyro, and it's still a ton of gray matter, and it still has all the other little features and parts that are a functional brain. So even if you were correct that there were two separate consciousnesses, you still have all the equipment that you don't have in any of these other organisms. So it just really becomes kind of irrelevant how many brains you can create inside of a human out of a single brain when you still have all the same structure.
Well, actually, here's the thing, because it's a related thing, but I'm not saying it in the argument. I agree with you. But it's more interesting, actually, than the question of does a bacteria have some sort of a awareness or whatever, because that we're not going to be bacteria. This question of how can you divide consciousness in a human brain is much more interesting. The idea that you can't, because then your so-called unconscious mind could actually be conscious of itself. It's in a little bubble too.
Yeah, I know what you're saying here. I know what you're saying. I know what you're trying to do here. I'm just saying there's no point in doing it, okay? Because of the way the structure is, it's still part dependent. And we know that it's all an illusion. Did you watch my last video? I mean, I did a little drawing video. Did you see the little drawing video? I mean, our consciousness is a projection, okay? It's a projection. It's completely an illusion created in our neurology. Every sensation and every thought, it's all a projection. It isn't a real thing. It's an illusion of reality. A fake reality created in our heads. And you can't do that without the hardware. And we have a ton of fucking hardware.
If you were to take, I'm curious, so forget it's a separate question, the whole plant awareness, okay. But you think on this splitting consciousness, and if it's an illusion type thing, that makes sense. There's some minimal amount of circuitry that'll do it, so you could probably divide a brain. But if you divided a brain in half, so you made all of the connections totally separate, being an atheist, there's no soul to worry about, so do you think that if you could transplant those into, hosts of some sort, that they would, be two different people and both have subjective experiences?
Well, I'm just saying, I just don't know how you could do that without having to transplant the entire hardware, the hypothalamus, all these other organs that make consciousness possible. So that would be my argument, that you'd have to take the whole projection room with it. So yeah, of course you could migrate a brain that way, but that's almost like making this cellular division argument. When a cell divides, what happens? Oh, that's right, it doesn't create a new membrane, it doesn't create new hardware, a new nucleus. No, it gives the new cell half of what it has. So it doesn't have to recreate those structures, it gives it the structure already built, and then puts a new DNA molecule in the middle of it.
The hypothalamus has two halves as well. The only thing that isn't shared, I think, is the pineal gland.
Well, I know. Well, just because something could be bisected doesn't mean you can cut everything in half. Okay, the fact that most things develop in us with this symmetry thing, the two pieces thing, the backups, doesn't mean that the two things don't work independently. My two arms work quite independently. They're quite obviously very similar, but they can be doing two different things. So just because the hypothalamus appears to be symmetrical doesn't mean you can split one in half.
but I think its connections are those that go through the corpus callosum.
Yeah, well, the point is, I think it is the entire functionality of the central nervous system goes through the hypothalamus. I think it is the organ that creates the illusion. That is the projector. That's the thing that takes this artificial reality, we create this model of reality that we create in our subconscious. That's the organ that projects it. Because that's the organ that falls apart in Alzheimer's. And I point that out in my video, that's the organ that's damaged in Alzheimer's. And you can see what happens. The capacity to access all these other parts of the brain are diminished. And it makes perfect sense, because this is the projector, and as the projector starts to break, you can no longer project consciousness. And eventually, when you know, I've seen people in long, 5-6 year stage Alzheimer's, and they start to lose everything. They can't even swallow anymore. They can't do anything anymore.
My grandmother just died after like 18 years of Alzheimer's. But anyway, yeah, no, I think that's kind of more or less the conventional view too, though it spreads out from there, that it's this timing thing. It goes the tick, tick, tick of the light. A projector is kind of a good metaphor, because it's the whole brain does the consciousness, but the hypothalamus is somehow like the strobe light, which a projector is, that flickers onto the right part, You know what I mean? It's like you can tune in a particular part of the brain circuitry. If you go just at a right speed and everything else, and you, just like tuning in a radio station, you get one idea versus another, and it does seem to be the hypothalamus. But yeah, but each half of the brain does seem to have its own one. So I think it's almost non-controversial that you could split the brain in two. If you could do that surgery, you hook it in with all the nerves and, the veins and all of that stuff, which would be the impossible stuff. It's very sci-fi, but in principle. And you would have two separate personalities and two people. And it's kind of an interesting idea then.
Well, I think it's just sort of, I think it's kind of simplistic to say that the brain hasn't evolved more complicated interconnections, and that it's just simply bisectable. I don't think it's bisectable in that sense. I think it has devoted.
Well, maybe it's bisectable.
I think it has devoted.
So two opinions. Two heads are better than one.
Well, I'm just saying your eyesight is not bisected, right? In your brain, eyesight is primarily on one side of the brain.
Yeah, I thought about that. It's why can't you bisect it? I've tried a lot to do what my pet chameleon would do, and you just can't do that shit.
Well, I'm just saying, I think there are things.
I want to use my eyes individually sometimes.
Well, I'm just saying, I just think it's being a little too simplistic. That's all I'm saying.
No, I agree. I thought about that before in terms of that shows a tight interconnection. But these experiments with these people that they separate, it's kind of interesting.
Well, I understand that it's interesting, but it's not. Like I said, that's not a major part of brain function. That's the oldest. That's the oldest part of the brain, and so that it probably has to do with the efficiency with which we do certain logic processes and other processes. But obviously, that part of the brain is not vital.
Well, look. Here's the thing, though. You seem friendly enough to the idea, and I agree. We don't know where it happens, but that some part of the brain has the function, uses the whatever organs and systems are involved with being conscious. It could be conscious. That could be even separate from you. And so, that means that ideas in your head, when you have them, sometimes might be conscious in some sort of different subjectivity. You might be able to, when you have your grandparent in your head, to a certain degree, that little idea, even though it's a simulation and a dream of yours, since you're dreaming it in brain, it has a pretend consciousness just like you have. And since in your case you think it's an illusion to a degree, yeah, well, so it's just an illusion that brain programs can generate. It might generate its own one, which is sort of like, makes it more like your real grandfather was copied into your head.
But again, there's no mechanisms for any of that copying stuff, memory stuff. All of those mechanisms don't exist in these other organisms. Beyond that, as I've tried to say, this is something that has to be coherent. It's not, you can't. A pain is worth nothing. A sensation is worth nothing if you don't have a brain that can react to it. You have to have a brain that can evaluate the pain and say, like, I'm hungry, and I'm afraid. I use this example many, many times, but to me it's a classic example of what the functionality of the brain would be. And the functionality would be is that we would have two competing sensations. One is hunger, one is fear, right? We don't want to get eaten by the lion, but we're hungry. This is the function. And now you have a brain that analyzes the circumstance based on these emotional reactions, and if the hunger gets strong enough, it'll overcome the fear. If the fear stays strong, it won't go out until it feels the fear subsides. I mean, you know, this is the functionality of a brain, and you do not have any way of creating that complex continuity between a sensation and thoughts inside of a fucking paramecium. It's just ludicrous to even go there.
Well, I wasn't even arguing that. I'm talking, this is stuff that it relates in the sense that I think I'm talking about something that not only can only neurons do.
Well, I'm just saying,
neurons,
you
but I
use
think
words like
it's
thirsty,
integrated.
Pyro,
Humans.
okay?
Okay, wait,
Thirsty,
human only
thirsty is a very
thirsty,
sophisticated
thirsty,
kind of desire, of pain, I mean, it's just not some sort of, it's not something that can be projected in a non-theater. You need a theater to project something like thirsty.
Maybe so, but I want to ask this other question about consciousness. It does relate, but this other question where I think only human consciousnesses can really do this, but I think our consciousness is sophisticated enough that unlike other animals, even other animals, we get a copy of a personality by observing or interacting with the person. And you can think of a traumatic experience where maybe it was an abuser and then you get this particular picture. But a better thing is a relationship with your grandmother or mother or something. You get a copy, or an uncle or cousin, of this person that passed away or they haven't passed away, and you have a dream, you know you have a copy. The human brain is sophisticated enough to make a really good rendering. But the thing is, since what it's rendering is another human, in principle, that rendering can be really good. That if a brain is able to have consciousness, that it really, your idea of your cousin is wrong, but it thinks it's your cousin. It thinks it's running in your brain.
I mean, Pyro, I almost wish you would just go watch my video, okay? Because I address exactly that point in my video. Because I talk about how our brain creates a synthetic reality in our brain. Our brain creates a synthetic reality that attempts to duplicate everything in the real world. So in my subconscious, there is a synthetic reality that contains everything. My representation of everything is in there. Some of those representations are accurate, some of them are completely flawed, but that's what the brain does. It attempts to parallel the reality in the brain as a synthetic representation, and then it displays it on our screen of consciousness.
So, on the subject of splitting consciousness, what of like dissociative identity disorder and whatnot? That's like a person splitting their consciousness within one machine, if you take the analogy for it.
Can I answer? I think that is always, I don't know now, maybe there's some truth to that. Yeah, but I've always thought that that was more one consciousness that is multitasking and using denial. And because when they therapize, even though it's controversial whether it really exists and stuff, but what it really is, but therapy for it, you can, join those personalities together. It seems like that helps show that it's one personality doing its strobe light trick, because it needed to get these little pockets of denial. So that's what I've always thought that was. I never thought it was really separate consciousness. And if you read the stories of it that seem most believable, you kind of see there is an element of somebody that's out of control, but is sort of just playing with personalities like a kid might to make, that wasn't me, that was my alter ego type things, But maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just giving my, I've thought about this stuff a lot, but it might have to change my idea, but yeah.
Well, the point is you don't have multiple personalities in your brain at one time conducting conscious disambiguation or something. You know what I'm saying? You slide from personality to personality, so all it is a nuance or a character that's placed on top of the information you already know. So they're all going to know the same things, all these personalities. They're just going to project in a very different way what priorities this information has, how emotional they're going to be. So it's almost like feminine side, masculine side. It's almost like fetish sex or something. I mean, it's just not that deep, a disconnection.
I know I'm flip-flopping because I was saying what you're saying, but the funny thing is a lot of the cases aren't believable, but the ones that are pretty believable what went on, they really have an amazing amount of differential memory. But one of them, like say the rascal, the wild one, will know about the regular personality's memories, but the regular personality won't. It is always a little convenient. Who knows what? It was an excuse to be wild and things
well,
like
there's
that.
always
There
does always seem to be, from the cases I've read up too, there always does seem to be a hierarchy, and there's usually one personality who knows all the other personalities and knows all of their secrets and all of their bullshit. So it is kind of like there's a director and there's players, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's not as disconnected. It's not just they're all equal. They're not all equals. They all have they all have a different hierarchy of ownership of your personality.
I remember when I was younger feeling like I was faced with, choosing a personality, and people are trying to tell you which personalities and roles to take on, and I always felt, well, to be cool you just have to go with whatever one is natural or whatever, but even that is just choosing. But I think there is a chance in the formation of the human mind to sort of choose, hey, I'll be this way, or hey, I'll have this. You might have some tendencies, but there's 3 or 4 that you could follow, and then maybe you'll switch tracks and do one or the other one. Who knows how it works out? But I think some of these people, that moment, their brain is so fractured, they actually get to make that decision in triplicate, which is why it turns into a real problem that they're actually afflicted with. It's not like a choice to be that way. But at one point, it was the choice of a kid that didn't know any better and was just making these random kind of choices kids make. And that's why I do believe it's a real problem.
Yeah, well, look, I have personal experience with it. I mean, I was schizophrenic or whatever. I mean, I had a voice in my head when I was 9 years old. I mean, it was a regular Darth Vader, nasty-ass motherfucking voice in my head. I mean, it wanted to throw me downstairs. It wanted to throw me in front of cars. It was a nasty motherfucker. And yeah, I could have manifested that personality in a way. I mean, that was the biggest fear of it, is that it was trying to possess me. I mean, I use that word, but there was this competition between me and it, and I was just terribly afraid of it. Yeah, and I don't have any, don't know any, who knows what would have happened, but I mean, I was just lucky it went away. If it didn't, I don't know where I would have gone.
I remember when I was a kid, I felt like there were voices in my head and people watching me, and I thought, that's weird, and maybe life is just this thing where they're fooling me, and they're just sitting up there like they're Romans in a box, and they're watching the life and making their comments, and they're positive or negative. And I remember being kind of bemused like that, like I wasn't going to let them, who cares? But I have to say, I never overcame it. I never felt that feeling go away, per se. I just sort of like, it doesn't matter, like a feeling like maybe there are ghosts. You just kind of mature where it doesn't matter. But I never really noticed that I concretely didn't feel that way. Or, for that matter, I think I hear voices now. My view is maybe I'm schizophrenic and I've just dealt with it this way of, it's okay to hear a voice in your head, but that doesn't mean you have to do what they say or believe what they say.
Well, that's what I mean, I don't want to say your voice
I found who those voices are.
Isn't the real voice, but I'm just saying this voice was different. I mean, this voice was real power inside my head. I mean, it wasn't just a voice. It was like a voice that breaks glass, you know what I mean, that blows up the world. Yeah. It's like it's like a throw-up kind of thing. It's like this powerful force that's running through your brain. It completely owns you. So I mean, I don't want to diminish what you're saying, but I'm just saying I just want to make it clear that there's a little bit difference about having like these different kinds of thoughts running through your head and having one of these dominating, really intense, crazy ass alien voice things in your head.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, I do think there's a similarity. There's also a difference of degree. There's also the difference of the background. I came from a family that got divorced, and my voices were in enough battle with each other that, I learned how to survive in that environment, I guess. But the thing is, in my case, if the voices are different, fine, but to me, they're traced mostly to, well, maybe in general to environmental factors, but a lot of times to people, and people that are critical of you, or people that were suspicious of you, or people that as a kid you wronged, and at the time, even if you forgive yourself now, you were only 5, you did feel guilt, and people try to guilt you out, and then they have this voice, and it's not necessarily that your brain's going to reproduce their actual voice. It's going to be more clever than that and turn it into a monster. And also I found that I think our minds, when we have some hurt feeling, we surround that with scary ideas, and to actually get back to that feeling and figure out that that's what's hurting you, you have to wade through these terrible visions of things that are scary to you, that your mind knows are scary to you, that are nightmares, that it's put around, and it's like very geographical like that. And so it's like, I like watching Mel a lot, and again, she deals with the literal sense of this, which I've never had to deal with. So I know it's very different when you're actually dealing with something where I've had friends that's like, no, I just need the drugs because it's that big of a problem. You can't be philosophical about it, and I'm being philosophical about it. But I think there's something similar in that the brain does work this way. We're many personalities together, and sometimes some of those personalities are assholes and overpowering, and that makes it kind of totally different, but still kind of, there's a similarity, because we are a community of things that can contradict and be actually other people's personalities installed in us, like the authoritarians in our life. You're authoritarian adults when you were a kid. Those guys install themselves, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets really complicated trying to find out what the source material is, but I mean, I guess I would just argue that they are just a phantom that's built out of some sort of emotional overload. So, I mean, your brain can't deal with the emotional, whether you're saying it is guilt, or whether it's an inferiority complex, or whether it's some sort of self-hate. And so it's gotten so burdensome that it almost separates it out of your regular subconscious stream and creates this separate personality. And it just manifests in that. Because it was just so rare that it would ever be able to peek into my reality. It's not like it talked to me every day, but it would just all of a sudden, I'd be on a staircase, it would all of a sudden show up. And it would just be almost like it was almost like it would knock you unconscious. It had such a loudness to it. So, I mean, I don't know, like I said, it's a little complicated to explain not only how it manifests itself, like what you actually experience is complicated and hard to describe, but it's also hard to describe exactly why your brain would manifest that illusion. So, I mean, I can talk about, too, like when I was really young, every night when I went to sleep, I would see a million little dots of color swirling in the room. And they were like little dots. I don't even know how to describe it.
In college.
And they would just swirl around the room, and I considered them my best friend. I mean, I really enjoyed it when I went to bed, because I would just lie there, and I'd have my eyes wide open, and I would just watch these colored dots swirl around the room. And I was like really disappointed. The mic should still be working. I was really disappointed when they stopped.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, I had a similar thing, and if I relax, I can see these swirls now, little tiny dots, rainbow dots, and they swirl around, and I've tried to figure out, am I looking at something inside my eyeball, because you can see fluids in there, right? The optical effects of said fluids, though. And I'm getting older. Maybe I'm just looking at my floaters. But the thing is, no, I've seen that there are floaters and things that swirl like that, but there's also this difference. And, I think if you look really closely at things like that, you're seeing how your brain works. You might be seeing something mechanical like, oh, these retinas don't work. these retinal cells are bad or whatever, or they're doing static electricity, making a little sparky special effect. But I think these kind of this glowing light thing, I think we have little bits of consciousness, you know, ideas, little elemental ideas, imagery ideas, that when you see a patch of blue, they actually conceptually, they go and adopt the concept of the feeling of blue, and they go, blueness here, and as a child, you're looking, you know, think of how a baby does it. A baby doesn't know it's even looking at a car or its parent. It just sees these blobs of color. What's it really looking at? It's looking at little splotches of light and rainbow. But as you get better and better as an adult, and those little functions learn how to pretend to be something in the real world, you just think about the real world. The fact is, this is what I mean when I say we're subjective creatures. We're really looking at, you know, like sparkling lights that know how to, and that's why some people have always believed in fairies and stuff. But if you realize, no, it's just because